question, yeah, could you give me an overview of how you ended up in UX?
Which to go first, Lev?
Hi, everyone. My name is Lade. I'm an experienced designer. So I got into UX when I was in my last year of college. I studied psychology, and there was a tech hub close to my school, so I used to just go there all the time. And I stumbled into a design meetup where I figured that this was fun and interesting, and became a regular attendee of that meetup. And from there, developed my interest, and then a job opening came up at the company that hosted the meetup for a UX researcher. And because I had a psychology background, it was really easy to transition into doing UX research. So that's pretty much a very short summary of my journey into UX research and UX.
I guess it's my turn. Hi, my name is Sanghee. I'm also a designer. This career transition to UX is personally really a meaningful topic for me because I have done it from design to research and then research to design back. So how I got into UX, I also didn't have the traditional UX design training. I went to game design program for grad school. And in game design, you focus on creating experience either that's fun or compelling. However, second year in my grad school, I accidentally stumbled upon a usability class where I was really surprised to find myself really fascinated by just watching people who believe that they are doing the right thing, but they are making mistakes. And that got me really thinking, like, what's leading to this phenomenon? So that led to my exploring into UX design and research further. Unfortunately, around that time, the school didn't offer classes in UX, so I had to self-teach a lot. And wow, that's like more than 9 years ago. So here I am.
Yeah, and thank you so much for taking your time to share your experience with us today. So going a little bit deeper, I think a lot of people, in this session will appreciate like trying to understand how can they make that shift, right, from where they are and to where they want to get, which is it may not be like a traditional UX background. And with that comes like I think this idea of bringing your authentic self to those opportunities. So like how do you brand yourself and like do your storytelling in that transition? Maybe we can have a discussion around that.
All right, sounds good. Should I go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So when you transition from one field to another, it's really easy to think that you have to completely change yourself to meet the job requirements. And it's like easy to think that because you're rewriting the resume and then you look at like, oh my God, like any of my past experience doesn't translate. However, career is more of a continuous journey and every chapter should be connected to one another. Otherwise, it leads to cognitive dissonance. Like you're the same person who's evolving, not a collection of different fragments. So when I mentor someone who's making that transition from different fields, the first question I ask is, what do you want to continue practicing from your previous role? It could be UI coding, spending time with the customers, or the domain knowledge you gained from your previous job. A lot of soft skills and experience actually translate in more ways than you think. So what you want to know is, what kind of what you want to bring from your previous role. Then you can start thinking about what additional skills you would need to build. But more importantly, like what is your story? So until my mentees figure this out, I actually do not continue reviewing their resume or portfolio because you have to find that story that resonates with you so you can be your authentic self during the job interview. Otherwise, it's really hard to show your true passion. Like I have seen candidates who may not meet every single job requirement, but like their story and passion like wins over the hiring manager and gets hired all the time. So once you find that story, it builds the foundation of your personal branding. Then you can start working on your resume and portfolio to reflect that.
Yeah. So piggybacking on what Sangi has said, I think that there's no one way to transition. There's no one way to transition. So hi Sam, you're on mute? I'm not sure if you're.
Oh my gosh, sorry, that's what was happening. No, I was trying to tell you, Sangi, that the people were mentioning that there's some feedback on your end. So maybe try audio off, earphones off when you try to speak next, and I'll just yeah, Ladi, you can keep going, but yeah, I just wanted to let you know, Sangi.
All right, cool. So I was saying that there's no one way to transition. There's no like do A, then B, then C, and then you're going to transition. Like Sanga said, it's really personal. Like think about your own. What about your experience? What about your background? What about the things that you like? What things do you want to take forward? Because it's very rare that any kind of career transition is like totally unrelated. There's usually something that connects where you were before or where you are now to what new role you want to explore and what new path you want to take. So it's about figuring out this new area that I want to go into. What are the reasons why I want to do them? And then what are the skills that I have gathered from all of my previous experiences, all of the previous things that I have done, whether from school or outside school, on personal projects or volunteering, and figure out how to tell a story of that and how it relates to your new path that you want to take. So for some people or some professions, it's easier to make that transition. So for example, if you have a psychology background, it's very easy to um, make that connection to UX, particularly UX research. If you have a background in design, interior design, or product design or industrial design, you can also, it's easier to make those kinds of transitions. But even if you have what you consider to be unrelated, there's still things that you can connect. So even like customer support, there are things that you can take from your skills as working in customer support that you can relate to UX. And so it's just figuring out your story, and really you can't copy somebody else's like journey and paste it for yourself. It's not going to work. So you have to think about your own unique experiences and say that this is the story that I'm telling about the journey and why I want to switch to this new role.
Such a great point. And I want to add one more thing. So this is advice that was given to me by hiring managers in different fields. They also pay attention to the action you take to get to the next level. So let's say if you come from like software engineering and you want to transition to design or research, then they also want to know what are the little things in your current job you're doing or as a side project to demonstrate it, that you're actually committed to make this?
Yeah, I think that's also very true. So it's not enough to just say, I want to transition and I can tell my story. You also have to like show that you're really interested in doing this. So it could be volunteering, it could be a side project, it could be taking an online course, it could be finding ways within your current role in your current organization that you can start working with your the design team, for example. If you're, well, I'm assuming that your company has a design team, that you can take some time and volunteer to work with them and start exploring that space. So even see if you actually want to do this, because it could be that you feel like you want to do UX, but then you do a couple of projects, you work on a couple of things, and you're like, this is not for me. So that allows you to explore the space before you fully commit into switching.
Yes. And also, don't be afraid of reaching out to people and learn about what they do day to day. Like everyone I know, like they have some experience, like coaching people, like whether like this is like how to think about transitioning to a different role. And mostly we are actually excited to have more people joining the field. So like if you're in a like company that actually has a UX functions, then just feel free to reach out and ask for a copy and Like you may be able to borrow books from them, so something to help you to ground yourself.
And then thinking about this, the personal branding piece and getting your story right. I'm curious if there are examples from your own journey of how you did that. Like, what was your sort of brand story or storytelling that you did? Were there challenges you had to overcome? I think examples are always really helpful.
So I'm actually going to give you an example of my mentee because I think that actually speaks really well. So I had a mentee who came from software engineering, and she really wanted to move to UX. But her challenge was that whenever she applied for a job, she keeps getting redirected to engineer role. And they're like, "Are you sure? Because you seem like a great fit for our front end engineering role instead." And that was really frustrating for her. So what we did was, as I mentioned, we went back to like, what are the things like, do you want to code? Or do you like working with an engineer? Like, what's that thing you want to continue with you? And then once we identified that, then we went to like activities to see like what's the right story. What are the things you don't want to tell your interviewer, but what are the things you want to emphasize? So we did a lot of reframing of like, I have a technical skills, but this would allow me to become better collaborator from design with your engineering team, rather than I have tech skills and I can also code. Like these are two very different things. And in the end, she got her first UX designer job and she's very happy. So that's one success story I have.
So for me, I think when I think about personal branding, I don't think of it from like a it's not just about saying that you can do this or you do that. It's about, from my own experience and perspective, is about like writing as you're learning. So one, this is like a very important tip that has worked for me and a number of people that I know, because I personally, a lot of the opportunities that I have gotten come from someone reading an article that I wrote or attending a talk that I'm given. And so it's like as you're learning, as you're working on projects, as you're exploring, as you're taking online courses, writing about what you're learning, documenting your process, sharing that with other people. And then sometimes it's really as simple as letting someone else know that you are looking to switch into this new area, because that's like it's a very simple thing that people often overlook, where even your friends may not know that you're looking to switch, which is weird, right? Issue. So if you're looking to switch, if you're learning things, if you're taking courses, working on projects, writing articles about what you're learning, what you're doing, sharing on your LinkedIn, for example, that you're open to UX roles or you're exploring the field. Writing articles can be a medium. You can create your own website. You can use LinkedIn posts and articles, just finding ways to share as you're learning and sharing your story. So storytelling and personal branding is not it's not one thing. It's like doing various things that share
I think we lost a little bit towards the end, Lade, but I think, yeah, we got the general gist. Thank you so much for sort of kicking us off and getting started on this topic, the both of you. So I think we can slowly sort of transition into the next topic, which is more of the interview side of things. Just a heads up to everyone on the call, if you've joined late, we are sort of, I'm monitoring questions on the audience Q&A. There is one question which I'm sort of going to hold off on till we get towards the end. But yeah, feel free to post more questions that you have within the Q&A feature. All right, and so to move on into like the UX design interview, there's this idea of like, there's so many questions we always get, but like trying to understand what is in our control and what is not. Maybe y'all can kick us off on that.
All right, then I will give us that. So I want to start off with the job interview is always two-way street, even though you may not feel that way. And it's actually rarely personal, even though all of us feel the outcome very personally. So let me start off with what is not in your control that you should never feel bad about yourself. So there are four things. One, the values of your hiring manager. Like, we are people and we are biased in some way. So if you are, let's say, an arts director, chances are you want to see more of what you do day to day. I'm a system-driven designer, so I'm more inclined to people with a similar skill set. So you cannot just like ignore these things. And oftentimes it really comes down to like teams need, but also the ratio of like UI design versus UX design. And everybody has a different definition when it comes to that. So if like there is a no good match, then it's not really about you. And also this is something you cannot predict. So you cannot optimize for what someone like who they are. Like it's a matter of like do you guys actually see the like shared value to each other? So that's one. The second one is the who's on your interview panel on that day and how they're feeling. Again, you don't have any control on that. So I have seen interviews where hiring manager may like you, but then someone on the team may not agree with that. And in the end, like it becomes like team decision and it could mean you're a great candidate, just happen to have a bad day because like someone didn't feel that way. Third one, can the team afford to train a less experienced designer or someone who's transitioning from different fields? I have seen teams that only hire senior designers because they're always firefighting and they cannot afford to spend time to train a new person. So large companies tend to have a policies to discourage this, but it happens all the time. And then the last one is timing. I have seen lures that's not built up for a year because the hiring manager wants perfection and then keeps rejecting great candidates, time's running out, and then suddenly like you're on the verge of losing headcount, and then someone comes along and they make an offer. So this is also luck, and sometimes you need that luck to get in. So you may be a great candidate, but if there's any of this misalignment that's completely outside of your control, then you may not get the job. But it does not mean that you're a bad UX designer or researcher. Um, Ray, did you want to add something to what's not in control?
So like Sanghee has said, so many things are not in your control. And the first thing to know when you're interviewing or job hunting and all these things is that it's not really about you most of the time. It's more about like circumstances, like some of the examples that Sanghee has given around the company, the hiring manager, the recruiter, the team, the particular team, and all these other things. There are situations where suddenly the team loses headcounts. This has happened like numerous times. So it's not, that's like the first thing to note. But zooming, going back a little before you even go into interviews is the kind of story that you're telling with your resume about who you are, the skills that you have, and what you're interested in is also very important. And also, like Sanghee said, some companies they don't hire junior designers because they're always like firefighting mode. So that's one of the things when you're like job searching or job hunting. It's very important to look at the kinds of organizations that you're applying to, and also to not always rely on just submitting your CVs. Sometimes like go the extra mile and reach out to someone on LinkedIn, for example, and introduce yourself and all of those things. Sometimes you may have an opening, and that's very valuable because a lot of openings are actually not published publicly. Like for me, for example, I think like 90% of the work I've done, whether freelance or full time, was from referrals. And when I go to the company website, you won't see the job ad on the company website. So it's important to make all those connections because it also helps when there's somebody on the inside who's basically quote unquote fighting for you, because that also happens sometimes where you make that connection and then there's somebody that can like be your quote unquote sponsor within the organization, right? So as for the actual interviews, prepare. So, like, you need to there are a lot of resources online. If you Google UX designer interview questions or case studies, prepare.
Daddy, I think we lost you. Can you still hear us?
Lots. I have like a bullet when you're hello.
Yes, sorry, you're back now. We just lost you for a bit when you were saying, prepare for the interviews.
Yeah, so prepare for your interviews. When you if you Google, if you go online, you find tons of examples.
Ladi, I think you're breaking off.
Of practice questions or sample questions and a very okay. So Sanghee, you can go ahead while I figure out what's happening.
All right, I will cover. So I want to quickly restate the like great points they raised, and I want to connect back to the earlier authentic branding story. We talked a little bit about also letting other people know about what you're interested in. So this is also where you can actually also maintain just letting people know, hey, like I really want to transition. Here is some progress I'm making. I just want to give you an update because I really valued the conversation I had with you, or I really respect your leadership in the space. And the thing is, like most of the time, actually, because you, as Lade mentioned, the job posting is kind of the last round. So if these people remember you and there's a really talented person who's looking for opportunity, then chances are they may actually get back to you and let you know that there's something coming up. So these two actually goes hand to hand. A few other things I want to mention that's in your control. Let me know when you come back. So there are a few other things. So one is you are in control of what information you want to convey to your interviewers. It doesn't matter whether it's an introduction, portfolio, resume, or stories you tell during the job interview. Like you can frame and select which information you want them to know. So for instance, I never go to an interview without preparing what I want them to know, what I want to say. So I write down, I read aloud, practice, and then I try to edit so that I can tell really concise story. If this information, I can just tell in one sentence rather than having to go back to like, in my past like 8 years, like this is what I've been doing as a career journey, blah, because people have a very limited attention span. So you really want to maximize the effectiveness of the communication with the information you want to emphasize on. So it makes it easier for the interviewers to remember. And if they want to know more, they're going to ask questions. Don't worry about not having everything you want to say in like a couple of sentences. Another thing that you have in control is then like curating the right kind of work that matches your story. So it's very tempting to put as many work samples as possible, but you have to be very intentional based on your personal branding and the strengths you want to highlight. So for instance, I'm not a visual designer, so I tend to stick to minimalist look and feel for two reasons. One, I don't want to give out false expectation that I'm interviewing for a visual design role and they're going to like dissect my work to the attenders and I'm like, oh shit, this is not me. But then at the same time, I also do not want to miss out of demonstrating that if there is an MVP design that we need to ship, I can do it. So you want to hit the right balance based on the strengths you want to demonstrate. And the choice is on you, how you want to do that. Few other things I could think of, treating your hiring manager as your customers. They have their need, their attention span, cognitive load, and whatnot. I have seen many portfolios where, like, the candidates, it's very clear that they get really tired as they're just trying to build their portfolio and start to lose track of how usable the portfolio site is or the deck is. Is it actually easy to comprehend? Is it just like word of word, or there are just nuggets of information for hiring manager to get a good sense of who you are? So this is all on you. And then one more thing is then it's also in your control to make most out of interviews that didn't go well. So treat the job interviews as a date. Good dates lead to potential relationship. Bad dates don't go anywhere. But you still learn something, either about you or the other person. So every interview is an opportunity to learn and hone your skills. I usually give about 6 months to find the right job if I'm like looking for the next opportunity. So give it time and focus on your learnings and move on because the right match will eventually come.
Yeah, that was really well said. Thank you so much. Lade, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah, so I was just going to complete what I was saying by when we say prepare for the interview, it doesn't mean that you should memorize like a script. That's a very bad idea because then it makes you sound like you're not like a very fun person to work with. Instead of memorizing like a script, what I do personally is I have like bullet points that connects that I have written down. Some of them I've said so many times that it basically lives in my head right now. But you should have like bullet points that are like markers for you that you can connect and create with a new story every time because you don't want to sound like you memorized your story because then it seems like it's not your experience and your story.
Yeah, that's a great point as well. I think there's a question that's been waiting in the Q&A. So this is about like, the response rate from recruiters. What are recommendations for people who are qualified for the position, but you can't get past the recruiter filters? So for my own application data, it's I can see that I have like a 30% canned email rejection rate and like 70% of the time ghosted. Yeah, any thoughts or recommendations around this?
So I think two things. Firstly, for every job, it's very important to include like keywords from the job posting into your resume or whatever you're submitting because that's what those systems use. Secondly, try there are some tools that allow you basically compare a job description to your resume and see like how many percent match you have. I can't remember any of them right now, but I know that there are some I have seen some online. And then I think one last thing that helps that is not necessarily related to the ATS and submitting your CV is the point I mentioned earlier about connecting with people. Because for a number of companies, if you go through a referral system, you might not have to then submit your CV on like some job application platform. So that's why it's very helpful to have those connections and keep update people that you have made connections with about where you are in your journey, what you're looking for next. Because I know that there are a lot of companies that have referral programs, and when you go through that program, you don't have to submit through an ATS.
Plus on everything that is said, there are a couple of factors that is also outside of actually anybody's control. Like one is the recruiting is a field where you see a lot of churns. Like people come and go, and you may not even be working with the same recruiter for longer than like few months, and then you have to start over as a hiring manager. So doing all the things like Reda mentioned, but it's also really important for the people to actually see your resume. So be it whether like university recruiter who comes to your school or trying to find like someone who's on LinkedIn and trying to see, you don't want to be too overbearing, but just coming in like with the like really good attitude and the other person like then will be able to help you to some degree. Another aspect is then also this is where like you this is going back to that story as well because when you reach out to a person like there are a lot of genetic messaging like messages a lot of people get like hey like I'm graduating from school blah 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 And then there are certain messages that I do not respond, which is like, hey, you have a job for me. I'm like, I don't. But I want you, I don't know you. But then there are responses, there are messages I respond better, which comes down to, hey, I'm really interested in the field. Any chance we could set a coffee meeting and can I learn more from you or whatnot? And eventually these little relationships are building up to a point where I may say, actually, you seem like a really smart person. Do you want to apply to my company? Send me your resume and I will see what I can do. Things like
Yeah. So building up on that, it's very important to not hound people or send incessant messages, but to actually make real connections to people. And also don't ignore your weak ties. You, there was some study some time ago that said that weak ties are actually more effective in helping you find opportunities than your stronger ties. So even if it's somebody you went to high school with, or somebody you went to college with, or somebody from some club you were part of, just reconnect with those people. And most of the time, people are understanding of those reconnections because, again, they're weak ties. So everybody knows that. Everybody in that conversation knows that you're not necessarily trying to rekindle the relationship. You're just asking for a specific thing. So don't try to deceive people and be sneaky. Just ask for what you want and be direct, and but also in a respectful and conscious manner.
yeah, totally. Because most people can actually tell if someone is reaching out for certain reasons behind. But at the same time, when it comes to career, everyone has gone through a similar experience before. So as Radha mentioned, leverage your weak ties. Could it be your family members, relatives, or your coworkers who knows other people who's working in the UX role? Because I have a 100% response rate when it comes to my coworker or friends reaching out to me, hey, I know this person who's really interested. Do you mind just talking to the person and set some time and just help them? And I'm like, I cannot say no to my friends or my coworkers. So trying to find a way, and LinkedIn is a really good way to kind of see who are your second and third connection.
Yeah, that's great advice. Thanks to both of you. There's a question here on, how can you, and it's around salary expectations when you're transitioning into UX, right? How can you justify a salary that corresponds not only to the experience in the new field, but also acknowledges relevant work from from other fields? So you don't have to settle for a more junior salary when you have actually several years of overall work experience.
That is a great question. So when I decided to move back from research to design, I actually got a promotion. And the way I was able to do was I was demonstrating a lot of industry experience that really sold my candidacy. So it goes back to the authentic, personal branding question, what's your value proposition? So a lot really depending on how close your past experience is with your current role. So let's say if this is a people manager role, then chances are a lot of skills will translate really well. If this is an IC role, then you will want to tell a really compelling story about how your past experience will actually make your team stronger and you will help in a different way. If you're coming from more seniority in the previous field, then you can also talk about how you coach the more junior folks, whatnot. So a lot of it comes down to positioning, and sometimes the tricky thing is that it may not be obvious to you what the team's needs are. So you kind of need to figure out, this is where you can be half prepared, but then you go in and then have to respond dynamically depending on what you learned during the interview and whatnot. But I would say have some range. I have seen in situation where this was not in UX, this was for the engineering, and even within engineering, like there are many different like skill sets involved. And I have seen someone who took emotion to join a new team to cultivate new skill. And on one hand, you don't want to do that ever because like when your base goes down, then it's a little bit difficult to recover, especially when you're also changing company or whatnot. But at the same time, if that really speaks to you, that's so important to gain that learning, then you need to ask yourself, like, how comfortable you are within that range. Like, I have walked away from money before to maximize my learning and sanity because everybody has a limited time, and that's one research you cannot renegotiate. So a lot really comes down to your personal priority and trying to see how much you can really argue for the next role.
So to add to that, um, it's important to know like your plan long term because there's some situations in which you have to consider would I take a pay cut to work at this company or is it more important to me at this time to actually just earn more? So you need to figure out like where you are. Sometimes it's unavoidable where you just have to take that pay cut, but you have to also think about what are the longer term effects of taking a pay cut now versus uh, waiting and finding a job that is willing to pay you at the rates that you want. So there's no one way or best answer, but that is just really personal to who you are and where you are in your life at that time and what is more important. Sometimes what is more important is I literally need to make more money. Sometimes what is important is I want to work at this company because it's going to help me longer term. So whatever it is to you, you need to figure out what that is and then use that to make the decision as to whether you will take a pay cut or not.
Adding to that, also consider what's your like middle step to get to where you want to be. I once had a coworker who started from marketing and he wanted to become a product manager, but they were like moving from marketing direct to the product manager, he didn't see a clear path. So what he did was he transitioned to product marketing role, which got him closer to the PM role he wanted, and then built some experience, and then eventually landed in the role he wanted. Sometimes you may choose to take a little bit of detour, and they may also be friendly in terms of negotiating for your salary and whatnot at a similar rate.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, if you have more questions, keep them coming in the Q&A. Let's see. There's one, I think this is a popular question around like portfolios. And I think would both of you be more comfortable speaking to design side of things or, because there's a question around research portfolios, but we can keep it general or keep it specific to design as well. But just kind of like what are sort of the recommendations on, how you position your portfolio?
So I can speak to more specifically to UX research and general UX portfolios that don't necessarily involve visual design.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing to note is definitely like I struggled a lot when I was trying to create my portfolio because almost all the examples I was seeing were for people who also had visual design skills as part of what they were doing for work. So the important thing is again to be able to tell a story. Like everything always comes down to being able to tell a story. And the story that you're trying to tell with the particular case studies or projects that you talk about in your portfolio is about it really follows one format, like as far as I can tell. But the way you flush it out will always differ. So the way that I have seen is this was the challenge, this was the context of the situation, this was the issue, and then this is what I did, and these are the people that I worked with to do this, and then this was the result or the impact. So something that people struggle with, and I also struggle with as well, is how do you define impact? And most people think that you have to say, oh, increase X by Y% or something. But the impact can also be qualitative. So it doesn't have to be number. So you can say, so for example, if you do usability test, your impact portion can be actual positive feedback or quote unquote negative feedback from the users that say, oh, users didn't like this, so we did this, and then it changed the direction of the product. So it doesn't always have to be, oh, we got a 10% increase in revenue because of the design, right? It can also be qualitative feedback from the users, qualitative feedback from your team, qualitative feedback from, if you're a freelancer, from your clients, all those kinds of examples. That's a very good way of showing the impact of the work that you have done as well. So basically figure out how to structure that story around these, because that's what people want to see. What is the process that you worked on, like the process that allowed you to reach this impact, and what was the context of the situation. Also, don't assume that whoever is reading your portfolio has context about the company that you're referring to or the product that you're referring to in your case study, because they may not, right? So they need to have, you need to provide enough context that they understand, whoever is reading your case study or is looking at your portfolio, understand what they're reading. And then also consider what format you're sharing your portfolio in. Is it a website? Is it a deck? Is it a PDF? Because that also determines like what you put in there and how you structure it. If it's a website, you have more flexibility around how you design it and how you structure it and what you put in there and how many you can share. But if you're submitting a PDF or sharing a slide deck, then there's a bit more restrictions around what you can show to the whoever is requesting for the portfolio or whoever is seeing the portfolio.
And just a follow-up question to you, Lade. I know for researchers, and this was in the question as well, for researchers, there's like a lot of variability in how you showcase past work. Like, do you have a website? Is a PDF enough? Or any other format? Like, do you have any thoughts on that?
So I have two portfolios. I have on my website, which is in Notion, very simple, very simple in Notion. And the reason why I ended up settling with Notion is because it removed the pressure of having to have a visually focused portfolio. It's very like text-based, and you can include screenshots of whatever you worked on or pictures from your sessions in there, but it's not very visual heavy. And then I also have a PDF version, which is basically a slide deck that I update and then convert to PDF for if a PDF is preferred. So it's best to have both, I think. Yeah. Yes, Notion. I use Notion for my website. That's where my website portfolio also is. So I think it's best to have both, so that if you need to, because people will request for different things. Some people request for your website link. Some people request for a PDF. So it's good to have both, so that you can submit whichever is required or requested for.
I am adding to that. So this is something I'm still trying to wrap my head around. So when I was interviewing researchers, when I was a researcher, I never look at their website other than their university, like, usually grad student so-and-so has this kind of body of work. So like, so speaking from like former hiring researcher who like look at things, like I was mostly trying to get a sense of who this person is and what's their body of work, because especially in research you can kind of want to get a sense of what's this person's like specialty. And sometimes where it really helps is giving a really clear signal. I'm a qualitative researcher or quantitative researcher. If you're a mixed method, then you want to specify that, because that really set certain tone as you're going into the interview. For the rest of the storytelling, what I used to look at was, like I used to because I'm now in example, is like how this would reflect this person's product sense. And product sense is something that's so critical in both UX design and research. Like there are like designer and researchers whose design recommendation would reflect their need. instead of the customer's need or the company's need. And back to what Lade said regarding impact, to me, the impact of research is how you tie these two back together. You have a certain findings, but what does that mean? How do you contextualize that data back to your product group? So when I see them through the like research, like so presentation for researchers during the interview, then I also try to think about what I'm hearing and seeing right now, like what this person will look like when they're actually on the job and trying to give a presentation to their respective product team. So these little things do matter, and a lot really comes down to, can you really make the data comprehensible in the context of product?
So I just want to add one more thing. So another reason why it's very helpful to have many. So the recommended tip for portfolios is to have 3 case studies, which is why I think that it's good to have both your website and a PDF or something that you can convert into a PDF, because sometimes people want to see variety of platforms and methods. So, for example, you want to show where you have done usability testing, where you've done interviews, where you've done diary studies, all of that. But again, you have to remember to keep it to like 3 to 4 case studies max. So you want to have a case study dump where you have all your case studies, and then you can pull whichever ones are more relevant to the job that you are applying to based on the description that you can see and what skills they're asking for or looking for. And that way you're tailoring the portfolio you submit to that job. And even if you're submitting your portfolio website can be a link to a Google Doc or a Google slide deck, for example. Because sometimes I share the link to my Google slide deck, sometimes I share it as a PDF, sometimes I share the link to my website. It just depends on what the recruiter has asked for or what the job description asks for. And to Sanghee's point about being conscious of how you present, because that's part of like the process. Because as a researcher, you're going to have to present a lot, or even as a UX designer, you're going to have to present a lot about the work that you do. So think about everything you do as part of your interview process, even down to like how you communicate, how you're presenting what you have done, because that's what you'll be doing. You'll be presenting what you have done as well to other people so that they can understand it. So you need to be sure that what you have in your portfolio communicates that without them even talking to you. And then when you're presenting it, it also communicates, this is what I did and this is the impact I had as well.
I want to throw in one tip, which is I do for the time when I go to interviews. Towards the end of the portfolio presentation, it doesn't matter you're in research or design, that's your setting the context of who you are, and then you to go into 101. So usually the last slide I have before I go to Q&A is, here are the things I'm really interested in doing in your company. And when it becomes really effective, it shows you understand their business. You're showing curiosity, but also you're also giving them to think about what kind of conversation you want to have with them during the 101. Because I have seen in the past reactions of the people usually going oh my God, we have so much to talk about during our 101. And that's a really good stepping stone going into your 101 interviews, because then suddenly there are a lot of common ground.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're sort of nearing the end here. I don't see any more Q&A questions. So any sort of final thoughts or, advice you'll have on transitioning to UX before we end the session? Oh, and we do have a new question posted, so maybe we can take that. Yeah, I think we have covered this to some extent, but maybe we'll take this one final question. What's the best way to convince the hiring manager that you know how reality works with a portfolio with student projects. So I guess like how much are student college or school projects gonna take you, how far they're gonna take you in the interview situation.
Okay. So I think for student projects, you should show a lot of transferable skills with like collaborating with others, showing that you can collaborate with other people, because that's how you will work in real life. Like in a company, you will have to collaborate with other people. Another tip is to actually try and find a real life project to work on. So, for example, volunteer with a nonprofit, or find some, you have friends who probably want to start something, um, find somebody to collaborate with on a project that actually is developed or implemented. Look for developers who are trying to build stuff and work with them to as a way to both show your collaborative skills and also work on something that actually goes live, for example. So it's very important to focus more, especially because you're very early in your career, and so it's understandable that you might not have a lot of real life workplace examples. But if you can, again, it goes back to the story that you're telling about the work that you can do and what you know. And if you have real life examples that are not necessarily related to design, so maybe you worked with a club in your school, or you manage some other thing for your class, you can use those examples to support your design work.
When it comes to students, like what I'm looking for really is a potential for growth. I do not expect like having like certain product experience per se. But there's something for me personally really important is the get me interested in you. Please do not redesign another Spotify. Like, because there are two things. One is it's really easy to go design something that's personally meaningful to you, but it doesn't speak anything about your values and how you want to give back to the community. So like I tend to respond better to, let's say, nonprofit project because it says something about what you care about. Um, Another risk of redesigning existing popular product is that like what students do not have as experience is all the constraint you have to deal with in both technical and business end. And you don't want the hiring manager to think, oh, but you have no idea what it took to get to that decision. You think it's easy to fix. No, like you don't want to start off from there. So put something that's personally meaningful that you can really speak with a passion, and also like give some glimpse of what's your personal value system, and go deep as you can, because like that's what I look at, like how much of a thinker this person is. Because if I'm hiring someone who's fresh out of school, I can train them to like how to build a product. I mean, that's what managers should do anyway, but I cannot change how you think about design. So that's my piece.
Yeah, and any final thoughts before we wind down?
You spend time going like figuring out your story. It actually takes longer than you think, because what happens is when you reflect back to what I want to bring from my past experience and where I want to go next, what usually happens is you start to think about it, and then you may realize actually like there are so many directions I want to go, or like I have certain emotions with this. Why am I feeling that way? So take some time to sort that out yourself. But once you have that clear like North Star of your career, then everything becomes so much easier.
Ladi?
Yeah, so I will just go back to sharing, whether what you're learning or what you're looking for next or what you're interested in, just always be sharing.
Love that. I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you so much, Lade and Sanghee, for taking your time on a Sunday morning and I know Sunday evening to spend time with folks out here. And thanks everyone for joining. Hope this was a helpful session. I know there was a question about where you can access recordings either for this session or past ones. So they're all uploaded on YouTube. So if you just search for UX Coffee Social or UX Coffee Hours, you'll find the entire list. And yeah, I'll be posting this recording out in a few days as well. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me. Thank you.
Bye.